The final clue. Every morning for the past 40 years, Walter and Marjorie sat together at the kitchen table, coffee steaming in their mugs as they tackled the newspaper crossword puzzle. It had become a beloved routine, one of those quiet traditions that made their day feel whole. A few months ago, Walter, always one for playful tricks, had started sneaking a little prank into their morning ritual. After Marjorie would work on the puzzle for a bit and step away, he'd swap her nearly completed crossword with a fresh, empty one. She'd return, puzzled, laughing as she accused him of messing with her old brain. He'd chuckle, insisting he hadn't touched it, though his grin gave him away every time. But a couple of weeks ago, Walter stopped the joke. His arthritis had gotten worse, and the light-hearted prank had lost its fun. Besides, Marjorie had caught on, and the laughter wasn't the same. He figured it was time to let it go and return to simply enjoying their mornings together. Then something strange started happening. One morning, Marjorie stepped away to answer the phone, leaving the crossword halfway filled out. When she returned, her pencil froze above the paper. The puzzle was completely blank. "Walter," she said, her voice tight with annoyance. "Very funny. I thought you were done with that silly joke." Walter looked up from his coffee, confused. "What are you talking about? I didn't touch it." She narrowed her eyes but said nothing more. Maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. After all, they were getting older. But the next day, it happened again. This time, Marjorie hadn't even left the room. She was sure of it. The puzzle had been filled in, at least half of it, when she glanced away to pour herself some more coffee. When she looked back, every square was blank. "Walter, seriously," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I didn't do anything," Walter shot back, genuinely hurt. His hands trembled as he held them up in defense. "I swear." They stared at the empty crossword, their tension in the room growing thick. Walter reached out, picking up the newspaper to inspect it. It was the same page, same puzzle, but the answers Marjorie had carefully written were gone. After that, the blank crosswords became a regular occurrence. Sometimes Marjorie would nearly finish the puzzle, only to look away for a moment and find it wiped clean. It happened when Walter was right there beside her, his hands nowhere near the paper. One morning, Marjorie tried an experiment. She filled out a single clue, carefully writing the letters into the grid. Then, without looking away, she set the pencil down, her eyes fixed on the crossword. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, to her horror, the letters began to fade. Slowly at first, as if being erased by some invisible hand. Within seconds, the squares were blank again. She gasped, pushing the paper away from her. "Walter, did you see that?" But Walter didn't respond. His gaze was locked on the puzzle, his face pale and tense. Without a word, he reached for the pencil and began to write something in the empty squares. Marjorie watched, her heart pounding, as his hand moved with a certainty she hadn't seen in years. When he finished, he set the pencil down and stared at what he had written. In bold, shaky letters across the center of the grid was a single word. Stop. The kitchen fell into an oppressive silence. Neither of them moved. The air felt heavy, thick with something they couldn't explain. Then, the letters in the puzzle began to fade again, disappearing one by one until the grid was blank once more. That night, neither of them spoke of the puzzle. The next morning, when they sat down for breakfast, Marjorie hesitated before opening the newspaper. But the routine was ingrained in them, and eventually, she unfolded the page and laid it out on the table. The crossword was already filled in, every square, every clue, complete. But the handwriting wasn't hers. It wasn't Walter's either. It was neat, small, and precise. And the last word in the grid, written across the bottom in perfect symmetry, sent a chill down her spine. You. Walter stared at the puzzle, his face drained of color. He slowly rose from his chair, backing away from the table. Marjorie's hands shook as she stared at the final word, unable to tear her eyes away. From somewhere deep in the house, they heard the sound of faint scratching.